Imagine the scene. A man without remorse, bringing his pregnant mistress to the funeral of his wife who had just passed away after a long and painful battle with a terminal illness. The betrayal could not be more cruel, the disrespect more explicit. He believed he was in control, thinking nothing could go wrong, but what he didn't know was that fate had an unexpected surprise in store. What happened on the day of the will reading, when everything seemed resolved, would leave everyone completely shocked. Grey clouds hung low over the memorial gardens in Sausalito, as if the sky itself was mourning. A small gathering of black-clad figures stood beneath a white canopy, their faces somber as the polished mahogany casket was lowered into the ground. The wind carried the scent of roses and salt from the nearby bay, mingling with the quiet sobs of the bereaved. Jacob Mason stood motionless at the edge of the grave, his expression unreadable behind designer sunglasses. At 42, the successful engineer cut an impressive figure in his tailored black suit, his dark hair showing distinguished touches of silver at the temples. While others dabbed at tears, Jacob's jaw remained tightly clenched, his posture rigid. "Everly Mason," intoned the officiant, "beloved daughter, friend and wife, taken from us too soon at the age of 38. As rose petals fluttered down onto the casket, whispers rippled through the small crowd. Not about the beautiful ceremony, nor about Everly's 2-year battle with an aggressive form of cancer. No, the whispers were about the woman standing next to Jacob, her hand occasionally brushing against his, in a gesture too intimate for mere colleagues. Willow Bennett was 31, with auburn hair and delicate features that couldn't quite be obscured by large sunglasses. Her modest black dress did little to disguise her rounded belly, approximately 5 months pregnant by the looks of it. She maintained a respectful distance from Jacob, but their connection was unmistakable, electric even in the somber setting. Dahlia Monroe, Everly's best friend since college, stood directly across from them, her eyes never leaving Jacob's face. Her mascara had long since been ruined by tears, but the hardness in her gaze whenever it fell on Jacob and Willow was unmistakable. "She fought so bravely," an elderly woman whispered too loudly to her companion. "And him bringing his mistress to the funeral, the nerve!" As the ceremony concluded, Jacob nodded mechanically as mourners offered condolences. Willow stayed by his side, drawing more heated glances. Everly's parents, Thomas and Catherine Callahan, approached last. Catherine's face was grief-stricken but dignified. Thomas couldn't even look at Jacob. 3 days, Thomas said, his voice barely audible. "Goldstein's office, the will." Jacob nodded once sharply. "I'll be there." As the crowd dispersed, Dahlia approached, her red-rimmed eyes narrowing at the sight of Willow. "You have some nerve," she hissed at Jacob. "Both of you." "Dahlia, please," Jacob started. "She isn't even cold in the ground," Dahlia continued, voice shaking. "Everly deserved better." "You don't understand," Willow interjected softly. "It wasn't—" "I understand perfectly," Dahlia cut her off. She turned back to Jacob. "Everly knew, you know. She wasn't as oblivious as you thought." Jacob's jaw tightened. "This isn't the time or place." "It never is with you, is it?" Dahlia laughed bitterly. "Always convenient timing. I'll see you at the reading." She walked away, shoulders squared despite her grief. Their Victorian home in Sausalito stood like a postcard against the bay, its blue-grey exterior catching the evening light in a way that had once made Everly gasp with delight when they first saw it 12 years ago. Jacob unlocked the door, allowing Willow to enter first. "Are you sure I should be here?" she asked quietly, looking around at the tasteful interior. Everywhere were touches of Everly, vibrant paintings on the walls, colourful throw pillows, a collection of sea glass arranged artfully on a driftwood shelf. "You heard what Dahlia said." "Everly knew about us," Jacob replied, loosening his tie. "There's no point in pretending anymore." He poured himself a generous whiskey from the bar cart in the living room. Willow wandered to the large bay window overlooking the water. "It's even more beautiful than you described." 3.7 million last appraisal, Jacob said flatly, as if reciting statistics from one of his engineering projects. "Plus the investments. Everly's paintings are starting to appreciate too." Willow turned to him, eyebrows raised. "Is that all you can think about? Money? Today of all days?" Jacob drained his glass. "What should I be thinking about? How I failed her? How I watched her waste away for 2 years? Or how about the fact that her best friend just confirmed she knew I was cheating?" His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "We weren't just cheating, Jacob," Willow said softly, one hand resting on her belly. "We fell in love." Jacob's expression softened as he approached her, placing his hand over hers. "I know, and soon we won't have to hide anymore." 12 years earlier, Jacob and Everly's wedding had been the talk of San Francisco's artistic community. He, the pragmatic rising star at a prestigious engineering firm. She, the vibrant, free-spirited artist whose modern designs were gaining attention in galleries across the Bay Area. They seemed the perfect complement, his structure balancing her spontaneity, her creativity softening his edges. They purchased the Victorian home in Sausalito, with a view of the bay that Everly insisted would inspire her work for decades to come. Jacob built her a studio with perfect northern light, and she filled their home with color and life. For 10 years they lived the California dream. Jacob's career flourished as he became a partner in his firm. Everly initially put her artistic ambitions on hold to work as a successful commercial designer, but eventually transitioned back to her true passion, painting landscapes that captured the ethereal quality of the Bay Area's light. They traveled extensively, collected art, hosted dinner parties where conversations flowed as freely as the wine. If there was a shadow on their seemingly perfect life, it was the children they had put off having. Next year, they always said, prioritizing careers and freedom until suddenly next year became too late. The diagnosis came without warning. Stage 3, ovarian cancer, already spreading. Everly faced it with the same fierce determination she applied to her art. "We'll fight this," she told Jacob, squeezing his hand in the doctor's office. "Together." And at first they did. Jacob rearranged his schedule, accompanied her to appointments, researched experimental treatments, held her hair back during the worst of the chemotherapy. He was the model husband, drawing admiring glances from nurses and doctors alike. "You're so lucky to have him," they would tell Everly, who would smile wanly in agreement. 6 months into treatment, Jacob's firm took on a major infrastructure project. "It's the opportunity I've been waiting for," he explained to Everly as she lay in her hospital bed. "I'll still be here for you, but I might need to delegate some of your appointments to Dahlia." Everly nodded, too weak to argue. "Do what you need to do." What Jacob needed to do, apparently, was work closely with Willow Bennett, the newly hired systems analyst assigned to his project. Brilliant, attentive, and unattached, Willow quickly became indispensable to Jacob, first professionally, then personally. Their first late night at the office led to take-out dinner. The first brush of hands over blueprints led to lingering glances. The first comforting hug during a moment of stress led to a kiss neither had planned. "This is wrong," Willow had whispered against his lips. "I know," Jacob replied, before kissing her again. For Willow, Jacob represented everything she'd ever wanted. Brilliant, established, passionate about his work. He painted himself as a man trapped in a marriage that had grown distant even before the illness. A man who needed understanding and support that his wife could no longer provide. "Everly and I stopped being partners long ago," he told Willow one night as they lay entangled in the sheets of her downtown apartment. "We were going through the motions. The cancer just made it impossible to ignore." Willow believed him. Why wouldn't she? Jacob was convincing because he had convinced himself first. As Everly's condition deteriorated, Jacob's visits to the hospital became less frequent. "The project is at a critical stage," he would explain when he finally appeared, sometimes bearing flowers that couldn't disguise his absence. Dahlia began to notice patterns. Jacob's excuses, the lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume, the way he checked his phone constantly, how he would step out to take calls, returning with a different energy. Everly noticed too, though she said nothing. Her artist's eye had always been attuned to details, to changes in light and shadow. Even as her body weakened, her perception remained acute. During her final month, when the doctors confirmed the cancer had spread to her liver and lungs, Everly made 2 significant decisions. First, she declined further aggressive treatment, opting for palliative care. Second, she asked Dahlia to contact her family's longtime attorney, Leland Goldstein. "I need to update my will," she told Dahlia, her once melodious voice now raspy, "and I need you to help me with something else." Dahlia, who had watched her friend fade while her friend's husband built a new life elsewhere, didn't hesitate. Anything. What Everly asked for was both simple and devastating. Truth. The law offices of Goldstein and Partners occupied the 15th floor of a sleek high-rise in San Francisco's financial district. Jacob and Willow arrived precisely at 10 a.m., He in another impeccable suit, she in a navy dress that accentuated her pregnancy rather than attempting to hide it. The conference room already held a small assembly. Thomas and Catherine Callahan, their faces drawn with grief, Dahlia, whose expression hardened at the sight of Willow, and two of Everly's cousins who had flown in from Boston for the funeral. Leland Goldstein, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and penetrating eyes, greeted everyone with professional courtesy. "Before we begin," he said once all were seated, "I want to express my personal condolences. Everly was not just a client but a friend. I've known her since she was a child." He opened a leather portfolio and removed several documents. "The will is straightforward in most respects. There are specific bequests for family members and friends." He nodded toward Dahlia and the cousins, "and donations to several arts organizations and cancer research foundations." Jacob nodded impatiently. As Everly's husband of 12 years, he naturally expected to inherit the bulk of the estate, the house, the investments, the increasingly valuable artwork. His financial future with Willow depended on it. Goldstein continued, his tone unchanging. "Now, regarding the primary assets, the Sausalito property valued at approximately $3.7 million, the investment portfolio of roughly $1.2 million, and the intellectual property rights to all of Everly's artistic works." Jacob leaned forward slightly. Beside him, Willow squeezed his hand reassuringly. "These assets," Goldstein said, "are subject to a special condition that Everly added to her will during her final visit to my office 3 months ago." The atmosphere in the room shifted. Dahlia's expression changed almost imperceptibly. The slightest curl of her lip, a gleam in her eye. "The condition," Goldstein continued, holding Jacob's gaze steadily, "stipulates that Jacob Mason shall inherit these assets only if he can prove he maintained fidelity to Everly throughout her illness. If he cannot provide such proof, or if evidence to the contrary exists, all assets will transfer to the newly established Callahan Arts Foundation, created in Everly's memory." The silence in the room was absolute. Jacob's face drained of color. Beside him, Willow inhaled sharply. "Additionally," Goldstein added, reaching into his portfolio, "Everly left a sealed letter for Mr. Mason, with instructions that it be opened only in this gathering." He handed Jacob a cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. With trembling fingers, Jacob broke the seal and extracted several pages covered in Everly's distinctive flowing handwriting. As he read, his expression transformed from confusion to shock to horror. "She knew," he whispered, so quietly that only Willow could hear. "She knew everything." Thomas Callahan's voice broke the silence. "What does it say, Jacob?" Jacob couldn't answer, his eyes fixed on the pages before him. Goldstein cleared his throat. "I believe I can clarify. 6 months ago, Everly hired a private investigator who documented Mr. Mason's relationship with Ms. Bennett in considerable detail. The evidence includes photographs, hotel records, text messages, and witness statements. All of this has been verified and is contained in a file in my possession." Willow gasped. That's an invasion of privacy." "It's the truth," Dahlia countered sharply. "Something both of you seem to have a problem with." Jacob continued reading, his hands shaking more violently with each page. Near the end he made a sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a sob, that caused everyone to stare. "What is it?" Willow asked, trying to read over his shoulder. "The experimental treatment," Jacob said hoarsely. "In Switzerland. She could have—" His voice broke. Catherine Callahan spoke for the first time, her voice tight with emotion. 6 months ago, her oncologist told her about a trial in Zurich. $2 million, but a 20% chance of remission. She fixed her gaze on Jacob. "She was going to tell you, ask you what you thought." "I never knew about any—" Jacob began. "She found your messages that night," Catherine continued relentlessly, "on your shared tablet, planning your future with her." She nodded toward Willow. "Planning for when it was all over." Willow's hand moved protectively to her stomach. "Jacob, you said—" "I believe," Goldstein interrupted gently, "that the contents of Everly's letter make it clear that the conditions of inheritance have not been met. As executor of the will, I must enforce its terms. The house investments and artistic rights will transfer to the Callahan Arts Foundation, effective immediately." "This is outrageous," Jacob sputtered, finding his voice at last. "I'll contest it. You can't do this." "You're welcome to try," Goldstein replied evenly. However, I should mention that Everly was examined by 3 separate physicians on the day she modified her will, all of whom attested to her complete mental competence. Additionally, the evidence collected regarding your extracurricular activities is quite comprehensive. What about our baby? Willow asked suddenly, her voice small. What happens to our child? For the first time, Goldstein's professional demeanor softened slightly. Everly thought of that as well. She established a trust fund of $200,000 for any child born to Jacob after her death. The child may access these funds upon turning 25, provided there is no contact between Jacob and the child. No contact? Jacob echoed incredulously. Those are the terms, Goldstein confirmed. Everly's note explains that she didn't want any innocent child to suffer financially for the choices of their parents, but she also didn't want you to benefit from those funds. Jacob slumped back in his chair, the letter falling from his grasp. Everything, the house with its perfect view, the comfortable future, the life he had planned with Willow, evaporated in an instant. Dahlia's voice cut through his shock. She told me at the end that the worst part wasn't losing you, Jacob. It was discovering she never really had you at all. As the meeting concluded, Jacob remained seated, staring at the final lines of Everly's letter. I could have fought harder. I might have been one of the 20%, but when I realized you were already planning for my absence, I couldn't find a reason to try. Why spend our money extending a life you were already moving beyond? This isn't revenge, Jacob. It's just the truth finally coming to light. This meeting is adjourned, Goldstein announced, gathering his papers with practiced efficiency. My office will contact all parties with the necessary paperwork in the coming days. The room emptied slowly. Thomas Callahan supported his wife as they exited, neither looking at Jacob. The cousins followed, whispering among themselves. Only Dahlia lingered, watching Jacob with an unreadable expression as he sat motionless, Everly's letter still open before him. She deserved better, Dahlia said quietly. Then she too departed, leaving Jacob and Willow alone with Goldstein. I need to see this evidence, Jacob finally managed, his voice hollow. Goldstein nodded. I anticipated that request. He placed a thick manila folder on the table. This is a copy of the investigator's report. The original remains in my safe. Jacob reached for the folder with leaden fingers. The label read simply, Mason Bennett Investigation. I'll give you privacy, Goldstein said, moving toward the door. Take all the time you need. When the door closed, Willow finally spoke. Jacob, what does this mean for us? For our baby? Jacob didn't respond. He opened the folder, revealing dozens of photographs. The first showed him and Willow entering her apartment building, his hand resting intimately on the small of her back. The timestamp indicated 7 months ago, just after Everly's first round of chemotherapy. The next showed them at dinner at Aquarello, an upscale Italian restaurant where Jacob had claimed to be meeting clients. There they were, clearly on a date, laughing over wine, his hand covering hers on the table. Oh my God, Willow whispered, looking over his shoulder. More photos followed. Jacob and Willow kissing in his car in the parking garage beneath his office building, entering a boutique hotel in Napa Valley, emerging the next morning. Each image was precisely dated and time-stamped. Beyond the photographs were printouts of text messages, dozens of them retrieved from Everly's tablet, the shared device Jacob had forgotten about. Jacob, can't wait to hold you tonight. These meetings are torture when all I can think about is you. Willow, your place or mine? Jacob, yours. E is staying overnight at the hospital for tests. I'll bring dinner. She saw all of this, Jacob murmured, the reality of his betrayal laid bare before him in clinical detail. He continued flipping through pages of evidence, credit card statements showing hotel charges and restaurant bills, a log of Jacob's work late nights that corresponded perfectly with his absences from home, even transcripts of interviews with a hotel concierge who remembered the nice couple who weren't wearing wedding rings. The final section was the most damning, a transcript of a conversation between Jacob and Willow recorded in his car 3 months ago. Willow, what happens after, when Everly's gone? Jacob, we won't have to hide anymore. I'll sell the house. Too many memories. We can get a place in the city closer to work. Start fresh. Willow, you really think we can have a normal life? People will talk. Jacob, let them. I've put my life on hold long enough. The doctors say it's just a matter of months now. Willow, I love you, Jacob. I just want us to be together properly. Jacob, we will be, when this is all over. Jacob closed the folder, unable to look at any more. The evidence was irrefutable, comprehensive, devastating. "Did you know?" Willow asked suddenly, her voice tight. "About the treatment in Switzerland?" Jacob shook his head slowly. "She mentioned something about experimental options. I thought she was grasping at straws. The doctors had already told us the prognosis was poor." "But 20%, Willow persisted. "That's not nothing, Jacob. That's 1 in 5. "You don't understand," he snapped. "You weren't there for the first rounds of treatment, watching her suffer, throwing up blood, losing her hair, begging for it to stop." "Don't you dare," Willow hissed, tears forming in her eyes. "Don't you dare make me the villain when you're the one who led me to believe your marriage was already over in all but name." Jacob rubbed his temples. "What are we going to do? We can't afford the house without the inheritance. My salary is good, but not $3.7 million home good." "Is that all you care about?" Willow asked incredulously. "The money? Your wife just died, Jacob. She knew you were cheating, and she died thinking you were waiting for her to die. And all you can think about is the house." Jacob looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "What do you want me to say, Willow? That I'm sorry, that I regret what we did? Would that change anything?" "It would be a start," she replied coldly, gathering her purse. "I need some air." Left alone, Jacob buried his face in his hands. His world was collapsing around him, and he couldn't even pretend it wasn't his own doing. Dahlia Monroe lived in a modest apartment in the Mission District, its walls covered with photographs of her global travels and several of Everly's early paintings. After the reading, she returned home and immediately poured herself a generous glass of Merlot. Her phone rang. Catherine Callahan. "He actually brought that woman to the reading," Catherine said without preamble, her voice tight with anger, flaunting her pregnancy in front of everyone. "I'm not surprised," Dahlia replied, sinking onto her sofa. Jacob always did whatever was convenient for Jacob. "Did you see his face when Leland read the conditions?" Catherine asked, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. "It almost made the past 2 years worth it," Dahlia admitted. "Almost." There was a pause before Catherine spoke again. "Everly asked us not to hate him. In her last days, she made us promise." "That was Everly," Dahlia said softly. "Better than all of us." "Was she right to do it this way?" Catherine asked. "The foundation, the conditions, all of it?" Dahlia thought about the night 6 months ago when she'd discovered the texts on Everly's tablet. She had gone to the hospital to bring fresh pajamas and found Everly sleeping. Needing to check an email, she'd used the tablet, only to find dozens of intimate messages between Jacob and someone named Willow. She had debated whether to tell her friend, already so weakened by cancer and chemotherapy. But Everly, upon waking, had seen Dahlia's face and known immediately that something was wrong. "I've suspected for months," Everly had said after reading the messages, her voice eerily calm. "The late nights, the new cologne, the way he checks his phone constantly." "You should confront him," Dahlia had urged. "No," Everly had decided, "not yet. I need to know everything first." That was when the private investigator had been hired, his reports delivered directly to Everly's hospital room in unmarked envelopes. Dahlia had watched her friend read each one with the same detached interest she might give a moderately engaging novel. "Are you going to answer?" Catherine pressed, pulling Dahlia back to the present. "Yes," Dahlia said firmly. She was right. Jacob forfeited his right to her legacy the moment he started planning for after, while she was still fighting to live. "The foundation will do good work," Catherine said. "Thomas is already talking to galleries about showcasing her collection." "She'd like that," Dahlia smiled sadly, her work outliving all of us. After hanging up, Dahlia went to her bookshelf and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a USB drive labeled simply Ease Insurance. On it was a complete copy of the investigator's findings, plus one additional item that hadn't been in Goldstein's folder, a video. Dahlia plugged the drive into her laptop and opened the file. Everly appeared on screen, sitting in her hospital bed, painfully thin but with clear eyes and a steady voice. "If you're watching this," she began, "then I'm gone, and the truth has finally come out. Jacob, if somehow you see this, I want you to know something. I don't hate you. I'm disappointed, heartbroken, and sometimes furious, but I don't hate you." She paused, adjusting her position slightly. "When you fall in love with someone, you see the best version of them. For 12 years, I believed that version was real. I don't know when it changed, when you changed, or when I just started seeing more clearly, but I know exactly when I stopped fighting." Everly held up her tablet, showing the damning text conversation about "after it's all over." "It was this moment," she said softly. "The same day Dr. Winters told me about the trial in Zurich. 20% chance of remission, $2 million. I was going to ask you what you thought if we should risk it. Then I saw these messages, and I realized you were already living in a future without me." A single tear rolled down her cheek. "So I made my choice. Not out of spite, but because fighting requires hope, and you took that from me. The money that could have given me a chance will now give other artists opportunities I never had. Maybe that's a better legacy than a few more painful months would have been." She wiped her tear away. "Dahlia, if you're watching this, thank you for being brave enough to show me the truth. And remember your promise, the foundation comes first. My work deserves to live, even if I couldn't." The video ended. Dahlia closed her laptop, tears streaming down her face. "I remember," she whispered to the empty room. 3 days after the reading, Jacob stood in the master bedroom of the Sausalito house, methodically packing his belongings into cardboard boxes. Under the terms of the will, he had 30 days to vacate the property. His phone rang. Goldstein's office. "Mr. Mason," the lawyer said when Jacob answered, "I wanted to inform you that the Callahan family has generously offered to purchase your personal effects from the house at fair market value. Furniture, appliances, anything you don't wish to move." "How magnanimous of them," Jacob replied bitterly. "They take my house and then offer to buy my sofa. It's a courtesy, Mr. Mason, nothing more." "Fine. Have them send an appraiser. I don't care." After hanging up, Jacob continued packing, carefully separating his belongings from Everly's. It was peculiar how 12 years of marriage could be so clearly delineated. His books on engineering and business, her art monographs and poetry collections, his practical clothing, her colorful scarves and dresses. He paused when he came to their shared photo albums. The earliest showed them young and carefree, hiking in Muir Woods, picnicking at Stinson Beach, laughing at their engagement party. He barely recognized himself in those images, the open smile, the adoring way he looked at Everly. When had that changed? When had her vibrant spontaneity started to feel like chaos to him? When had his stability started to feel like a cage to her? The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Jacob went downstairs to find Willow on the doorstep, looking pale and drawn. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. He stepped aside. "I'm packing. The foundation wants me out as soon as possible." Willow nodded, following him into the living room where more boxes sat half-filled. "Where will you go?" "I've found a month-to-month rental in the city. Nothing special, but it'll do until—" He trailed off, realizing he had no plan beyond the immediate future. "Until what, Jacob?" Willow asked, settling carefully onto the sofa. "Until we get married, until the baby comes? What exactly is your plan here?" Jacob ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Willow. Everything's happened so fast." "No," she said firmly. "It didn't happen fast. You had an affair for nearly a year while your wife was dying. You made promises about our future together. You led me to believe we'd live in this house, raise our child here. I didn't know she'd changed the will." "That's not the point," Willow snapped, then took a deep breath, cradling her belly protectively. "The point is, you were so sure of yourself, so sure of what would happen. You never even considered that Everly might have a say in how her story ended." Jacob couldn't argue with that. He'd been so focused on managing his double life that he'd underestimated his wife completely. "I saw the video," Willow said suddenly. Jacob looked up sharply. "What video?" "Dahlia sent it to me. Everly recorded a message before she died." She watched his face carefully. "She talked about the treatment in Switzerland, about how she was going to ask you if it was worth trying." "I told you she never—" "Stop lying, Jacob," Willow interrupted, her voice cracking. "The video is dated the same day you took me to Napa for the weekend. Remember? You told me Everly was stable, that her parents were with her. You turned your phone off for 24 hours. Jacob felt the blood drain from his face. "That weekend?" Willow nodded. "That was the day she found out about the trial, the day she decided not to fight anymore." Jacob sank into an armchair, the full weight of what he'd done finally hitting him. Not just the affair, not just the betrayal, but the possibility that his actions had directly contributed to Everly's decision to stop fighting. "She had a 1 in 5 chance," he whispered. "And she chose not to take it because she saw our messages," Willow continued relentlessly. "Because you made her believe you were waiting for her to die." "I wasn't," Jacob began, then stopped himself. "Wasn't he? Hadn't he been planning their life together after it was all over while Everly was still alive? Hadn't he resented the way her illness had complicated his life? She gave up, Willow said, tears streaming down her face now. She gave up because you already had. Jacob couldn't speak. The truth of it crushed the air from his lungs. I need to know something, Willow said after a long silence, and I need you to be honest for once. If it had been me in that hospital bed instead of Everly, would you have done the same thing? Would you have started planning your next life while I was still fighting for mine? The question hung between them, unanswerable. In the bay window, the sun broke momentarily through the clouds, illuminating a small table where a stack of medical brochures sat untouched. On top was a glossy pamphlet from the Hoffman Institute in Zurich, its cover showing a smiling woman with the words, "A New Chance," emblazoned above her. Jacob reached for it with trembling hands. It had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, just like Everly's knowledge of his betrayal. Inside, he found a yellow sticky note in Everly's handwriting. Ask Jay if we should try. Tomb, 20% chance. Worth it? He looked up at Willow, the evidence of his negligence clutched in his hand, and finally confronted the devastating question at the heart of everything. Had he just been unfaithful, or had his betrayal actually shortened his wife's life? 2 weeks after the reading of the will, Jacob sat in a leather chair across from Martin Schaefer, one of San Francisco's most prominent estate attorneys. The office, with its panoramic view of the Bay Bridge, projected exactly the kind of confidence Jacob desperately needed. The problem is evidence, Schaefer explained, closing the folder containing copies of the private investigator's report. It's comprehensive and frankly damning. There must be something, Jacob insisted. Mental duress. She was on heavy pain medication. Schaefer shook his head. As I mentioned, Mr. Goldstein was thorough. 3 separate physicians evaluated Everly's mental competence on the day she modified her will. All certified she was lucid and understood the ramifications of her decisions. What about undue influence? Dahlia Monroe was with her constantly. She could have manipulated Everly, convinced her I was unfaithful. Were you unfaithful? Schaefer asked pointedly. Jacob didn't answer. That's what I thought, the attorney continued. Look, Mr. Mason, I don't judge my client's personal choices, but courts tend to take a dim view of contesting a will when the grounds for disinheritance are provably accurate. So there's nothing we can do? I didn't say that. Schaefer leaned forward. We could challenge the will on technical grounds. Improper execution, ambiguous language. It's a long shot, but it might force the Callahans to settle rather than endure lengthy litigation. How much would that cost? My retainer is $50,000. Total costs could exceed $200,000, with no guarantee of success. Jacob blanched. His savings, while substantial for an engineer, wouldn't cover such expenses. Consider carefully, Schaefer advised. Sometimes it's better to accept the loss and move forward. Jacob left the office with a contract he couldn't afford to sign, and the sinking realization that Everly's revenge had been as meticulous as it was complete. In her downtown apartment, Willow sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, scrolling through flight options to Portland. The pregnancy had progressed to 6 months, her belly now prominently rounded beneath her t-shirt. The baby, a girl according to the recent anatomy scan, kicked vigorously as if sensing her mother's agitation. I know, little one, Willow murmured, placing a hand on her stomach. We've got a lot to figure out. A text from Jacob appeared. Meeting with the lawyer didn't go well. Can I come over? Willow stared at the message, conflicting emotions churning inside her. The past 2 weeks had transformed her understanding of both Jacob and herself. The man she'd fallen in love with, charming, attentive, seemingly trapped in a failing marriage, had been revealed as something else entirely. Not tonight, she replied. Not feeling well. It wasn't entirely a lie. Morning sickness had given way to persistent heartburn and fatigue, but the physical discomforts paled compared to her emotional turmoil. She opened her gallery and found a photo taken 8 months earlier, her and Jacob at a company holiday party, before her pregnancy, before Everly's death, when their relationship still felt like an exciting secret rather than a devastating mistake. How different things had looked then. 8 months earlier, the Morrison Engineering holiday party transformed the ordinary office into something magical, with twinkling lights, catered hors d'oeuvres, and an open bar serving signature cocktails. Willow, new to the company but quickly making her mark, wore a forest green dress that complemented her auburn hair. "You look stunning," Jacob said, appearing beside her with 2 champagne flutes. "Water for you since you're on call tonight." That was their code. She was always on call at events where they needed to maintain professional distance. The private joke made her feel special, part of an intimate conspiracy. "How's Everly?" she asked quietly, accepting the water. She always asked, feeling it maintained some moral standard in their increasingly complicated relationship. "Stable," Jacob replied, with the rehearsed neutrality he always used when discussing his wife. "Her parents are visiting this weekend, so I can work late on the Reynolds project if needed." "What a dedicated employee," Willow teased, allowing her fingers to brush his as she took the glass. Later that evening, as colleagues danced and chatted, Jacob led her to the deserted server room, locked the door and kissed her with an intensity that took her breath away. "I can't stop thinking about you," he murmured against her neck. "It's driving me crazy, pretending there's nothing between us." "Then don't pretend," Willow whispered back. "Tell her. End it cleanly." Jacob pulled back slightly. "It's complicated. Her condition." "I know," Willow sighed. "I shouldn't have said anything." "Hey," Jacob cupped her face. "When the time is right, we won't have to hide anymore, I promise." She believed him completely. The same evening, Callahan residence. "He's working late again," Everly told her mother as they sat in the living room of her parents' San Francisco home. Once vibrant and energetic, Everly now moved slowly, her body weakened by cancer and treatment. "The Reynolds project is apparently quite demanding." Catherine Callahan studied her daughter's face. "And you believe that?" Everly smiled thinly. "Would it matter if I didn't? You could confront him. And say what? Are you cheating on me while I'm dying? What good would that do?" Everly picked up her tea, her hands trembling slightly. "Besides, I don't have proof. Just instincts." "Your instincts have always been good," Catherine observed. "My instincts didn't warn me about the cancer," Everly replied bitterly. "Or about Jacob. What will you do?" Everly gazed out the window at the fog rolling in across the bay. "For now, nothing. But if my suspicions are correct, well, I still have some moves left to make." In the present, Willow set down her phone and moved to the window of her apartment. The same fog now blanketed the city, shrouding the buildings in ethereal grey. Her perspective had shifted dramatically in recent weeks, forcing her to reconsider every moment of her relationship with Jacob. The holiday party hadn't been special. It had been calculated. The locked server room, the promise of someday, the careful balance of seeming to care about Everly while systematically betraying her, all of it now seemed like a well-rehearsed performance. Her phone buzzed again. "Please, Willow, we need to talk about our future. As if it were still that simple. 3 days later, Jacob paced the hardwood floors of his rented apartment, phone pressed to his ear. "I understand the constraints, Mr. Goldstein. But surely there's room for negotiation," he argued. "I'm not asking for the house or the investments. Just some of the artwork. Pieces that had personal meaning to both of us." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Goldstein replied evenly. "The will is explicit. All artistic works transfer to the foundation. What about items I gifted her? Legally, those were gifts, Mr. Mason," Goldstein interrupted, "given without reservation. Unless you have receipts indicating they were loans rather than gifts, they remain part of the estate." Jacob ended the call and hurled his phone onto the sofa. Every avenue he explored led to the same conclusion. Everly had outmaneuvered him completely. The doorbell rang. Jacob opened it to find Dahlia standing in the hallway. "May I come in?" she asked without preamble. Surprised, Jacob stepped aside. "I didn't expect to see you." "Believe me, this isn't a social call." Dahlia entered, surveying the modest apartment with a critical eye. "Quite a step down from Sausalito." "What do you want, Dahlia?" She turned to face him. "The Callahans are converting the house into the foundation headquarters and gallery space. We begin renovations next week. There are some personal items that might have meaning to you, photographs, books with inscriptions. I've been tasked with offering them to you before we clear everything out." "How generous," Jacob replied sarcastically. "It's more than you deserve," Dahlia shot back. "I voted to donate everything to Goodwill." Jacob sighed, his anger deflating. "I'm sorry." "Yes, I'd appreciate having those items, thank you." Dahlia nodded stiffly. "I'll have them delivered tomorrow." She turned to leave, then paused. "There's something else you should know. The Foundation's first exhibition opens in 3 months. It will feature Everly's final works, a series she painted during her last 6 months. She called it Betrayal in Blue. Jacob felt a chill. She painted during that time? I thought she was too weak. There's a lot you don't know about her final months, Dahlia said. She painted when you weren't around, which, as it turns out, was quite often. As she left, Jacob remained frozen in place, contemplating yet another revelation about the wife he thought he'd known so well. In Portland, Oregon, Willow sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes she hadn't unpacked since arriving 3 days earlier. Her mother, Patricia Bennett, entered with a mug of herbal tea. "Your doctor called to confirm your appointment tomorrow," she said, setting the mug on the nightstand. "I can drive you." "Thanks, Mom." Willow managed a weak smile. Patricia sat on the edge of the bed. "Are you going to tell me what really happened? You don't just quit your job and move back home at 6 months pregnant without a reason." Willow had told her parents a sanitized version: unexpected pregnancy, relationship problems, needing family support. She hadn't mentioned Jacob's marital status or Everly's death. "It's complicated," Willow hedged. "Is he married?" Patricia asked bluntly. Willow's shocked expression provided the answer. "Oh, honey," Patricia sighed. "I raised you better than that." "He was separated," Willow defended weakly. "His wife was ill. It wasn't supposed to be like this." "They never are." Patricia took her daughter's hand. "Is he going to support the baby?" "He says he will, but—" Willow hesitated. "Things are complicated financially right now. His wife died recently and there were issues with the will." Patricia's expression hardened. "His wife died? Recently? How recently?" Willow couldn't meet her mother's gaze. "About a month ago. And you're 6 months pregnant." Patricia did the math instantly. "So while his wife was dying, he was—" "Mom, please," Willow interrupted, tears welling. "I know how it looks. I know what I did. But I loved him. I thought he loved me too. And now? Now I don't know what to think." Willow wiped her eyes. "The man I fell for and the man I see now seem like completely different people." Later that night, alone in her room, Willow opened her laptop and did something she'd been avoiding. She searched for information about Everly Mason. Articles appeared, mostly from San Francisco art publications. "Rising star in Bay Area art scene. Everly Callahan Mason, capturing light and shadow." There were images of exhibitions, reviews praising her unique perspective and emotional depth. Then, from 3 weeks ago, an obituary in the San Francisco Chronicle. The photograph showed a woman with intelligent eyes and a warm smile, thin from illness but still beautiful, still vibrant somehow. The article praised her contributions to the art world and announced the establishment of the Callahan Arts Foundation to continue her legacy of supporting emerging artists. Willow found herself reading about a stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. This was the woman whose husband she'd taken, whose life she'd complicated during its final chapters. Jacob had painted Everly as distant, cold, their marriage as effectively over, even before her diagnosis. The woman in these articles seemed nothing like that portrayal. Her phone rang. "Jacob, I've been trying to reach you for days," he said when she answered. "Where are you?" "Portland," Willow replied. "I needed some time with my family." "You just left without telling me?" His voice rose. "Willow, we need to figure things out. The baby will be fine," she interrupted. "I have prenatal care arranged here. That's not the point. We're supposed to be partners. We're supposed to face this together. Like you and Everly faced her illness together?" The words escaped before Willow could stop them. Silence stretched between them. "That's not fair," Jacob finally said. "Isn't it?" Willow's voice shook. "I've been doing some research, Jacob, reading about Everly, looking at her work. She doesn't seem anything like the woman you described." "You didn't know her. And I'm starting to think you didn't either," Willow cut in. "Or maybe you just didn't want to. It was easier to reinvent her as someone you could justify betraying." "Why are you doing this?" Jacob demanded. "What happened to we fell in love? What happened to starting fresh together?" "Reality happened," Willow said quietly. "I'm having your baby, Jacob. I need to think clearly about what kind of father you'll be. What kind of partner. What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I watched how you treated someone you promised to love in sickness and in health. I watched you abandon her when she needed you most. And now I'm wondering if you'll do the same to me if things get difficult." Jacob's voice hardened. "I never abandoned Everly. I was there, I took care of her. Until it became inconvenient," Willow pressed. "Until I came along and offered an easier alternative." "That's not how it was." Then tell me something, Willow said, her voice suddenly calm. The treatment in Switzerland. If you had known about it, really known, understood that she had a 20% chance, would you have encouraged her to try? Would you have spent the $2 million to give her that chance? The silence that followed told her everything. That's what I thought, Willow whispered. You know what terrifies me, Jacob? The possibility that someday our daughter might need you to fight for her, and you'll decide it's just too complicated. Willow, please, I need time, she interrupted. Time to think about what happens next, for me, for the baby. Don't shut me out, Jacob pleaded. She's my daughter too. Yes, Willow agreed, one hand resting on her belly. And that's why I need to be absolutely certain about you before I bring her into your life, because unlike Everly, she'll have someone protecting her from disappointment. She ended the call, set down her phone, and looked again at the image of Everly on her screen, the woman who, in death, had inadvertently saved her from making the same mistake. With unsettling clarity, Willow realized that she and Everly's stories had become irrevocably intertwined, their experiences of Jacob forming a complete picture that neither woman could have seen alone. The baby kicked sharply, as if punctuating this realization. In that moment, Willow made a decision. Whatever happened next would be on her terms, not Jacob's. She would rewrite the ending of their story, just as Everly had rewritten hers. The Morrison Engineering conference room fell silent as Jacob concluded his presentation. The Reynolds project, once his crowning achievement, had fallen weeks behind schedule, plagued by miscalculations and coordination failures. These delays are unacceptable, Mason, said Howard Morrison, the firm's founder and Jacob's longtime mentor. The client is threatening to walk. I understand, Jacob replied, gathering his scattered notes. I'll personally review everything this weekend. That won't be necessary, Morrison countered. Alan's team is taking over effective immediately. Jacob's head snapped up. But this is my project. Was your project, Morrison corrected. Your work has been substandard for months. We've been patient given your personal circumstances, but our professional reputation is at stake. The other partners avoided eye contact as Jacob stood frozen, another piece of his life crumbling away. Later, in Morrison's private office, the older man's tone softened. Take some time, Jacob. Paid leave. Get your head straight. I don't need leave, Jacob insisted. I need to work. Morrison leaned back in his chair. You know, rumors travel fast in this industry. Your situation with Everly, with Willow. People talk. Jacob stiffened. My personal life has nothing to do with my work. Doesn't it? Morrison challenged. You've missed deadlines, forgotten meetings, snapped at colleagues. The Jacob Mason I hired 12 years ago was meticulous, focused, reliable. That man hasn't shown up to work in months. I can fix this. This isn't just about the Reynolds project, Morrison interrupted. It's about trust. Clients trust us with multi-million-dollar projects. Partners trust each other to deliver. That foundation has been damaged. Jacob recognized the verdict in Morrison's words. Are you firing me? I'm offering you a choice, Morrison replied carefully. Take a 6-month sabbatical. Get professional help, or continue on this path and force my hand. Jacob left the office with neither his pride nor his project intact. In the elevator, he caught his reflection in the polished doors. Hollow eyes, unkempt hair, tie askew. The facade of control he'd maintained for so long was visibly disintegrating. His phone buzzed with a text from his landlord. Rent payment overdue. Please remit immediately to avoid eviction proceedings, another piece crumbling. In Portland, Willow arranged framed photographs on the dresser of what was becoming a nursery, a small room adjacent to her bedroom in her parents' craftsman-style home in the Selwood neighborhood. She'd shipped her belongings from San Francisco and given notice on her apartment, making her relocation official. Her mother entered with a box labeled baby clothes. Mrs. Chen across the street sent these, Patricia explained. Her granddaughter outgrew them. That's sweet of her, Willow said, examining a tiny yellow sweater. Patricia watched her daughter. Any word from him? He calls daily, Willow admitted. Texts constantly. I've been limiting communication. And the child support discussion? Willow sighed. He says he wants to help, but his financial situation is complicated right now. She didn't elaborate on Jacob's job issues or mounting debts. Information gleaned from their brief, tense conversations. We should consult an attorney, Patricia advised. Establish formal support arrangements before the baby arrives. I know. Willow smoothed a hand over her 7-month belly. I just keep hoping he'll do the right thing, without legal pressure. Patricia's expression softened. You still care for him. I care for who I thought he was, Willow clarified. That person would have stepped up without being forced. Her phone lit up with Jacob's daily call. Willow silenced it, turning back to the nursery preparations. Each ultrasound photo and tiny outfit represented her focus now, a future shaped by her choices, not his. The Callahan home in Pacific Heights was abuzz with activity, as Dahlia directed workers hanging track lighting in what had once been Everly's childhood bedroom and would soon be the smallest exhibition space in the Callahan Arts Foundation's headquarters. The lumen level needs to be adjustable, she instructed the electrician. These watercolors require specific lighting conditions. Catherine Callahan appeared in the doorway. The gallery designer has questions about the main exhibition space. Together, they descended to the home's expansive living room, now transformed with pristine white walls and museum-quality display fixtures. Thomas Callahan stood with a suited man examining floor plans. We've selected 35 pieces for the inaugural exhibition, Thomas explained. Everly's work from the last 5 years, culminating in the Betrayal in Blue series. That series should have its own room, Dahlia suggested. It's powerful enough to stand alone. The designer nodded, making notes. And the installation pieces, they'll require special mounting. My daughter was very specific about the presentation, Catherine said, opening a leather-bound notebook filled with Everly's handwriting. She left detailed instructions for everything. Indeed, Everly had thought of everything. In her final months between treatments and pain management, she had methodically planned not just her revenge on Jacob, but her artistic legacy. The notebook contained exhibition layouts, artist statements, even press release drafts. Nothing was left to chance. She knew exactly what she was doing, Dahlia murmured, running her fingers over Everly's distinctive script. She always did, Catherine replied. Even as a child, Everly saw 3 steps ahead. Jacob never understood that about her. He thought her artistic nature made her impractical, when really she was the most strategic person I've ever known. Later, alone in the future main gallery, Dahlia stood before one of Everly's final paintings. A large canvas dominated by shades of blue, with fractured geometric shapes, suggesting broken glass or shattered ice. Within the composition, subtle figures could be discerned, 2 forms intertwined, observed by a solitary figure at a distance. The painting's power lay in its emotional impact rather than literal representation. The observer experienced the isolation, the betrayal, the cold realization of truth. It was Everly's pain made visible, beautiful, and devastating. This is what he couldn't see, Dahlia whispered to the empty room. This is what he missed. Jacob stood at the bar of a dimly lit North Beach tavern, nursing his 3rd whiskey. The establishment was nearly empty on a Tuesday evening, just a few regulars watching a baseball game on the overhead television. His phone displayed a cascade of problems. Another payment reminder from his landlord, a notice that his credit card was approaching its limit, an email from Morrison requesting confirmation of his sabbatical decision. He scrolled to Willow's contact information, hovering over the call button. She'd answered only 2 of his last 7 attempts to reach her, each conversation brief and unsatisfying. The emotional distance between them had expanded to match their physical separation. Rough day, the bartender asked, sliding a bowl of peanuts his way. Rough month, Jacob replied, downing the remains of his drink and gesturing for another. Lady troubles or money troubles? The bartender asked as he poured. Jacob laughed hollowly. Both, and then some. Usually one causes the other, the man observed sagely. Jacob considered the amber liquid in his glass. How had it come to this? 6 months ago he'd had everything. Successful career, beautiful home, adoring mistress, comfortable future. Even his wife's illness had been carefully compartmentalized, managed like one of his engineering projects. Now it was all gone, dismantled by Everly's posthumous revelations. But the strangest part wasn't losing his possessions or status. It was the creeping realization that he'd never truly seen his wife until she was gone. Fragments of their 12 years together flashed through his mind, Everly insisting they buy the Victorian despite its high price, confident that San Francisco real estate would only appreciate. Everly negotiating his starting salary at Morrison Engineering, pushing for stock options his younger self hadn't valued. Everly creating a carefully diversified investment portfolio that had grown to over $1 million. Behind the free-spirited artist had always been a shrewd, practical mind, one that had ultimately outmaneuvered him completely. "You know what's funny?" Jacob said to the bartender, who hadn't asked but nodded politely. "I always thought I was the responsible one, the planner. Turns out I didn't know anything about planning, not compared to her." He pulled out his wallet, finding it emptier than expected. He placed his credit card on the bar with a sigh. One more debt to add to his mounting collection. The Callahan Arts Foundation held its private preview 3 months after Everly's death. The guest list included prominent Bay Area artists, gallery owners, critics, and select members of San Francisco society. Conspicuously absent was Jacob Mason, who had not been invited. Dahlia, elegant in a black dress that Everly had once complimented, stood beside Catherine and Thomas as they cut a ribbon at the entrance to what had been the Callahan family home and was now a memorial to their daughter's talent. Everly believed that art should reveal truth, Thomas told the assembled guests, even when that truth is painful, perhaps especially then. The foundation established in her name will support artists who share that conviction. Guests moved through the transformed spaces, murmuring appreciatively at both the art and the thoughtful design of the galleries. The final room, featuring the Betrayal in Blue series, elicited the strongest reactions. Several visitors openly wept. A prominent critic approached Dahlia. "These final works, they're extraordinary. The emotional depth, the technical skill. It's as if her impending death sharpened her vision somehow." "It wasn't death that sharpened her vision," Dahlia replied quietly. "It was betrayal." The critic studied the centerpiece painting more closely. "Ah, I see it now. The figures. This is personal, isn't it?" "All great art is personal," Dahlia answered diplomatically. Everly transformed her experience into something universal. That's what made her special. Later, as the last guests departed, Dahlia found Catherine in Everly's former studio at the top of the house, now preserved exactly as she had left it. Paintbrushes still in their jar, half-squeezed tubes of paint arranged by color, sketches pinned to corkboards. "It was a success," Dahlia said. 3 paintings sold already, all proceeds to the foundation." Catherine nodded, touching a dried paint palette. She would have been pleased. She opened a drawer in the studio desk, removing a sealed envelope. "I found this while we were preparing the space. It's addressed to you." Dahlia accepted the envelope, recognizing Everly's handwriting immediately. "When was this written?" "I don't know," Catherine admitted, "but it was in her final arrangements folder. I think she meant for you to have it after everything else was settled." Alone in the quiet house later that night, Dahlia opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter and a small key. "My dearest Dahlia, if you're reading this, then our plan has succeeded. The foundation is established, Jacob has faced consequences, and my work continues without me. Thank you for your courage and loyalty. I couldn't have done any of this without you. There's one final piece to this puzzle. The enclosed key opens a storage unit at Golden Gate Storage, Unit number 427. Inside you'll find my last gift to you, and perhaps to Jacob as well, though he doesn't deserve it. Some truths are too precious to be revealed all at once. Some must be earned. Whether Jacob has earned this one is for you to decide. All my love." Everly Dahlia stared at the small key. What final surprise had Everly planned, and why leave the decision to her? A month later, Jacob sat in a modestly furnished office, facing Dr. Elena Abramovich, the therapist he'd finally agreed to see at Morrison's insistence. "I've lost everything," Jacob concluded after relating the events of the past months. "My wife, my home, my career, Willow." He shrugged helplessly. "Maybe I deserve it." Dr. Abramovich observed him carefully. "That's the first time you've acknowledged responsibility since we started these sessions. What else can I say? Everly caught me cheating and punished me from beyond the grave. It's poetic justice." "Is that how you see it? As punishment?" Jacob considered the question. "At first, yes, it felt vindictive, cruel, but lately, I've been thinking about that treatment in Switzerland, the 20% chance she gave up. And I can't stop wondering if I would have supported her trying it if I had known, if I would have spent the money, stayed by her side through more pain and uncertainty." He rubbed his face wearily. "The truth is, I don't know. And that's the worst part. I don't know what kind of man I really am. Perhaps that's where your real work begins," Dr. Abramovich suggested. "Not in reclaiming what you've lost, but in discovering who you are now." Jacob nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to accept what's happened and move forward. What does moving forward look like to you? I don't know yet, Jacob admitted. But it starts with honesty. With Willow, about the financial reality. With Morrison, about whether I can really return to work. With myself, about who I want to be for my daughter. For the first time in months, Jacob felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead was difficult, humbling, but at least it was a path. He would accept the consequences of his actions. He would rebuild modestly. He would be the father his child deserved. This resolution lasted exactly 3 days. The storage unit was climate-controlled and meticulously organized, like everything in Everly's life. Dahlia used the small key to unlock the padlock, sliding the door upward to reveal several labeled boxes, a filing cabinet, and a painting covered in protective cloth. Curious, Dahlia removed the cloth first. The painting beneath was unlike anything in Everly's known collections, a portrait of Jacob, rendered with surprising tenderness. He appeared thoughtful, vulnerable, his expression capturing something essential about him that his public persona never revealed. Taped to the frame was an envelope marked simply, "The Truth." Dahlia hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a medical report on Hoffman Institute letterhead, dated 6 months before Everly's death. Scanning the document, Dahlia's breath caught. The report detailed a consultation for the experimental treatment, including probability matrices and cost analyses. But the conclusion wasn't what she expected. After thorough review of Mrs. Mason's case, we regret to inform her that her specific cancer progression and previous treatment history make her ineligible for our experimental protocol. While our treatment shows promise for certain patients, Mrs. Mason's condition falls outside our current parameters. We strongly recommend continued standard care under her oncologist's direction. Attached was a note in Everly's handwriting. They rejected me. 0% chance, not 20%. Jacob never knew about this consult. I wanted to surprise him with good news, not another disappointment. I never corrected the misunderstanding because it was easier, in the end, to let everyone believe I gave up a chance I never actually had. Dahlia sat heavily on a nearby box, the document trembling in her hands. The cornerstone of Everly's revenge, the treatment Jacob had supposedly denied her by his betrayal, had never been a real option. She had crafted a perfect lie, one that even Dahlia had believed completely. Beneath this revelation were more documents. Everly's actual medical records showing the cancer had progressed further than she had admitted to anyone. Correspondence with 3 other experimental programs that had also declined her case. And finally, a sealed letter addressed to Jacob. Dahlia stared at the letter, understanding finally what Everly had meant in her note. This was the truth, a truth that would change everything. The question was, did Jacob deserve to know it? The gallery lights illuminated each brushstroke of Everly's work, casting gentle shadows that seemed to give the paintings additional dimension. Jacob stood motionless in the entrance of the Callahan Arts Foundation, having slipped in during public viewing hours when he knew the family wouldn't be present. He'd avoided this place for months, unable to face the physical manifestation of all he had lost. Now desperation had driven him here. He moved through the galleries slowly, each painting an indictment. Everly's earlier work, landscapes filled with light and possibility, gave way to increasingly fractured compositions as the exhibition progressed chronologically. The emotional journey was unmistakable, hope dissolving into confusion, then betrayal, then a cold, clear-eyed purpose. In the final room, Jacob confronted the Betrayal in Blue series. The centerpiece, a massive canvas dominated by fractured azure shapes, hit him with physical force. Within the abstract composition, he could clearly discern 2 figures entwined, observed by a third standing apart. The isolation of that observer, the absolute loneliness captured in blue geometric fragments, made his throat constrict. "We're closed to the public today," came a voice from behind him. "But I suspected you might eventually find your way here." Jacob turned to find Dahlia watching him, her expression unreadable. "I needed to see it," he said simply. Dahlia nodded, moving to stand beside him before the painting. "What do you see?" "Her pain," Jacob answered without hesitation. "Her awareness. How clearly she saw everything, while I thought she was oblivious." "She saw more than any of us realized," Dahlia said enigmatically. They stood in silence for several moments, the painting looming before them like a frozen moment of revelation. "I've lost my job," Jacob finally said. "Paid leave became a resignation. My apartment lease wasn't renewed. Willow barely speaks to me. My daughter will be born in a few weeks and I have nothing to offer her." He laughed hollowly. "Everly's revenge is complete. Is that what you think this was? Revenge? What else would you call it?" Dahlia turned to face him directly. "I've been asking myself that question for months. Revenge, justice, truth, maybe all of them." She reached into her bag and withdrew an envelope. "This belongs to you." Jacob stared at it. "What is it?" "Something Everly left for you. I've been deciding whether you deserved to see it, and now you've decided I do. I've decided it's not my choice to make," Dahlia corrected. "This was between you and Everly. It still is." Jacob accepted the envelope with trembling hands, recognizing his wife's handwriting immediately. "You've read it?" "Yes," Dahlia admitted. "It changes things, Jacob, but not in the way you might hope." Before he could open it, the gallery door opened again. Thomas and Catherine Callahan entered, stopping abruptly at the sight of Jacob. "What is he doing here?" Thomas demanded, his grief still raw beneath his anger. "I invited him," Dahlia said, surprising everyone, including Jacob. "There's something he needs to know." Catherine's gaze fell to the envelope in Jacob's hands. "Is that—" "Yes," Dahlia confirmed, "from the storage unit." A silent communication passed between the women. Catherine nodded almost imperceptibly, though her expression remained guarded. "We'll give you privacy," she said finally, touching her husband's arm. "Come, Thomas." Thomas hesitated, tension visible in every line of his body. "You destroyed her," he said to Jacob, voice tight with restrained emotion. "I know," Jacob whispered. Something in his tone, the complete absence of defense or excuse, seemed to reach Thomas. His posture softened slightly. "Read it here," he said, "in front of her work, where she can see you." The Callahans retreated, leaving Jacob and Dahlia alone again with the paintings. Jacob broke the seal on the envelope, unfolding several pages covered in Everly's distinctive flowing script. The letter was dated 2 weeks before her death. "Jacob, if you're reading this, then everything has unfolded as I planned. You've lost the house, the money, your comfortable future with Willow. You've faced consequences for your betrayal. Part of me, the angry, hurt part, hopes you're suffering. I won't pretend otherwise. But there's something you need to know. Something I've kept from everyone, even Dahlia until now. The treatment in Switzerland, the miraculous option with a 20% chance of success that you supposedly denied me by your infidelity, never existed. Not for me. I consulted with the Hoffman Institute privately. They rejected my case immediately. My cancer was too advanced, my previous treatments too extensive. I had no chance, not 20%, not even 1%. The doctors gave me 3 months, which proved optimistic in the end. The story about giving up because of your affair was a fabrication, my final work of creation. I didn't fight because there was nothing left to fight for, not because you broke my heart. Though you did break it, thoroughly and irreparably. Why lie? Because I needed someone to blame. Because watching you plan for my death while I was still living was unbearable without some form of justice. Because I wanted you to question for the rest of your life whether your actions hastened my end. Did you kill me, Jacob? No. The cancer did that efficiently enough, but you killed something equally precious. The trust between us, the safety I thought I had in your love. For that, I couldn't let you profit from my death. I couldn't let you and Willow build your new life with the resources meant for our shared dreams. I don't know if this truth brings you relief or deeper pain. Perhaps both. Use it as you will. But remember this, betrayal reveals character, both the betrayers and the betrayeds. What did our final chapter reveal about you? About me? Those are questions only you can answer now. The vengeful part of me hopes you suffer, but the part that once loved you, perhaps still does in some damaged way, hopes you learn, see more clearly, live more honestly, be the man I once believed you were. Goodbye, Jacob. This is the last thing I will ever give you, the truth, however complicated it may be. Everly Jacob lowered the letter, his vision blurred with tears. The revelation twisted in him like a knife, not the relief he might have expected, but a deeper, more complicated pain. She lied, he whispered. Yes, Dahlia confirmed. But why does that matter now? The outcome is the same. Because, Jacob struggled to articulate the chaotic emotions surging through him, because I've been torturing myself thinking I killed her, that if I hadn't been with Willow she might have had that 20% chance. And now that you know she never had that chance, does that absolve you? Jacob stared at the letter in his hands. No, he said finally. It doesn't change what I did. Just what it cost. What it cost her, Dahlia corrected gently. Jacob looked up at the centerpiece painting again, seeing it with new understanding. The blue wasn't just betrayal, it was isolation, the profound loneliness of dying while the person who promised to stand beside you was already moving on. I never gave her the chance to say goodbye, he realized aloud. I was so busy planning for after that, I missed being there for during. Dahlia nodded, tears forming in her own eyes. That's what she couldn't forgive. Not the affair itself, but your absence, when she needed you most. Why show me this now? Jacob asked, indicating the letter. Because Everly believed in truth, however painful, and because, Dahlia hesitated, because your child deserves a father who understands the weight of his actions, who might become worthy of her. Jacob's tears flowed freely now, the accumulated grief and guilt of months breaking through his carefully maintained control. Here, surrounded by Everly's final works, the magnitude of his betrayal and her response to it finally reached him fully. I'm sorry, he sobbed, though whether to Dahlia, to the absent Everly, or to himself even he couldn't say. I know, Dahlia replied quietly, for whatever that's worth now. Thomas found them 30 minutes later, Jacob sitting on a bench before the centerpiece painting, his face ravaged by tears, but somehow more present than Thomas had seen him since Everly's diagnosis. Catherine and I would like to speak with you, Thomas said, his tone carefully neutral. Jacob nodded, following him to what had once been the Callahan family dining room and was now a small conference area. Catherine sat at the table, composed but wary. Dahlia shared the contents of Everly's letter, she began, when Jacob was seated. About the treatment. I'm sorry she felt she needed to lie, Jacob said. Are you? Thomas challenged. Or are you just relieved to shed some guilt? Jacob met his father-in-law's gaze directly. The guilt remains. It's just differently shaped now. Something in his response seemed to satisfy Thomas, who exchanged a glance with his wife. We're establishing a research grant, Catherine explained, through the foundation, specifically for the type of cancer that took Everly. It won't benefit from the publicity of our daughter's story if the truth about the treatment becomes known. Jacob understood immediately. You want me to keep the lie alive. Let people believe she gave up a real chance. We want her death to have meaning, Thomas corrected, to potentially save others even if it couldn't save her. Jacob considered this. The grant would perpetuate a falsehood about him, that his betrayal had potentially hastened Everly's death by destroying her will to fight. But it would also create something positive from the tragedy. I'll respect your wishes, he agreed finally, and I'd like to contribute to the grant. Anonymously. Catherine raised an eyebrow. From what resources the will... I still have some savings, Jacob interrupted, and my 401k. It won't be millions, but it's something. The gesture visibly affected the Callahans. It wasn't forgiveness, that might never come, but it was acknowledgement, a step towards something beyond bitterness. We accept, Thomas said simply. As Jacob prepared to leave, Catherine touched his arm lightly. One more thing, Everly's final painting, the one that wasn't in the exhibition. Jacob looked confused. I didn't know there was another. It was in the storage unit with the letter, Dahlia explained. A portrait of you. Me? Jacob's voice cracked with surprise. She painted it before discovering your affair, Catherine said. It shows how she saw you, who she believed you were. Can I see it? Jacob asked tentatively. The three exchanged glances before Dahlia nodded. I'll bring it to the main gallery. Minutes later, Jacob stood before a canvas that shattered his remaining composure. The portrait showed him not as he appeared physically, but as Everly had seen him. Strong yet vulnerable, serious yet capable of joy, flawed yet worthy of love. It was himself, as he had never seen himself, rendered with such intimate understanding that it could only have come from someone who had truly known him. At the bottom, nearly hidden in the brushwork, Everly had painted a small inscription, What Might Have Been. Jacob reached out, his fingers hovering just above the canvas without touching it. I never deserved her, he whispered. No, Thomas agreed quietly. But she chose you anyway. Try to become the man in that painting, Jacob, for your daughter's sake, if not your own. The following week, Jacob transferred his entire 401k balance, $347,682, to the newly established Everly Mason Research Grant. The transaction left him with minimal savings and an uncertain future, but brought the first peace he'd felt since Everly's death. He composed a letter to Willow, enclosing a check for the remainder of his liquid assets. "This isn't formal child support. That will come from my future earnings, whatever they may be. Consider this an advance, an acknowledgement of responsibility. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I only ask for the chance to be present in our daughter's life, on whatever terms you deem appropriate. I'm starting over in every sense. The man I was, the man who betrayed Everly, who misled you, no longer exists. I'm trying to become someone else, someone better. It will take time, but I want our daughter to eventually know that her father faced his failures and worked to overcome them. I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. Just please, don't shut me out completely." 3 days later, Willow called, their first substantial conversation in weeks. "I received your letter," she said without preamble, "and the check. It's not enough," Jacob acknowledged, "but it's everything I have right now." "I wasn't calling about the money." Willow's voice softened slightly. "Mum and I were talking about the baby, about you." Jacob waited, afraid to hope. "I don't want to keep her from you," Willow continued. "Whatever happened between us, she deserves to know her father. But there need to be clear boundaries." "Anything," Jacob agreed immediately. "I'm staying in Portland, building my life here. If you want to be part of her life, you'll need to accommodate that reality." "I understand." "And, Jacob," Willow hesitated, "I need you to be honest with her from the beginning. Age appropriate, of course, but honest. About your mistakes, about Everly, about all of it. I won't build a relationship on lies, even comfortable ones." The request struck Jacob powerfully, a demand for the truth he had evaded for so long. "I promise," he said, meaning it completely. 2 weeks later, Jacob received another call from Willow. Her voice was strained, breathless. "It's time," she said simply. "My water broke. We're heading to Providence Medical Center." Jacob was already on his way to the airport before the call ended. The maternity wing of Providence Portland Medical Center hummed with quiet efficiency. Jacob sat in the waiting room, having been permitted that much by Willow and her mother. The expected resentment from Patricia Bennett had been tempered somewhat by his immediate appearance, his obvious concern, and perhaps by whatever Willow had shared about his recent changes. After 6 hours, Patricia emerged, her expression a complex mixture of joy and cautious acceptance. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, she announced. "A healthy girl. Willow's asking for you." Jacob followed her through the antiseptic corridors to a private room where Willow reclined in bed, exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Jacob approached tentatively, overwhelmed by emotions he hadn't expected, protectiveness, wonder, and a fierce, immediate love that took his breath away. The infant's face was pink and perfect, her eyes closed in peaceful sleep. "She's beautiful," he whispered, "like her mother." Willow smiled faintly at the compliment. "Would you like to hold her?" With trembling hands, Jacob accepted the tiny bundle, marveling at her delicate features, the wisp of dark hair, the miniature fingers curled into fists. "Have you decided on a name?" he asked. Willow hesitated. "I was thinking Aurora." Jacob looked up, surprised. "Aurora? It means dawn," Willow explained. "A new beginning." She paused. "I also thought we might give her Everly as a middle name, if that seems right to you." The suggestion caught Jacob completely off guard. "You would do that after everything?" "It's complicated," Willow admitted. "But she was a part of this story too, of how we got here. And from what I've learned about her, she deserves to be remembered." Jacob looked down at his daughter, Aurora Everly Mason, and felt the weight of the past and future converge in this tiny, perfect being. Here was his second chance, his opportunity to become worthy of the trust this child would place in him, to honor the legacy of the woman he had failed. "Thank you," he said to Willow, his voice thick with emotion. As he held his daughter, Jacob silently made a vow, not just to be present for Aurora, but to embody the qualities Everly had once seen in him, the man in the portrait who had existed in her vision, if not in reality. He would become that person, not to erase his mistakes, but to ensure they shaped rather than defined him. Outside the hospital windows, dawn was breaking over Portland, bathing the new family in golden light. A beginning, tenuous but real, built not on the comfortable lies Jacob had once preferred, but on difficult truths that might, with time and effort, lead to something genuine and lasting. 3 years later, the Callahan Arts Foundation headquarters buzzed with activity as staff prepared for its 3rd anniversary celebration. What had begun as a memorial to one artist had blossomed into one of San Francisco's most respected arts organizations, supporting dozens of emerging talents through residencies, exhibitions, and grants. Dahlia Monroe moved through the space with practiced authority, directing the placement of new installations and approving final details for the evening's gala. As executive director, she had transformed her grief into purpose, channeling Everly's vision into tangible opportunities for artists who might otherwise struggle for recognition. The lighting in the East Gallery still needs adjustment, she instructed an assistant. The new Vasquez sculptures cast interesting shadows when illuminated properly. On it, the young woman replied, making notes on her tablet. And the Everly Mason retrospective room. Should we include the new acquisition? Dahlia paused, considering the question. The new acquisition was a previously unknown early work of Everly's that had surfaced at an estate sale in Marin County. The foundation had purchased it immediately. Yes, she decided. Place it between the college self-portrait and the honeymoon landscapes. It bridges that period nicely. As her assistant departed, Dahlia found herself alone in what had once been the Callahan family living room and was now the main exhibition space. The foundation had expanded beyond this building, recently purchasing an adjacent property to accommodate its growing programs. But this remained its heart. Her phone chimed with a text from Catherine Callahan. Flight landed. We'll be at the house by 4. How are preparations? Dahlia smiled as she replied, Everything on schedule. The new grant recipients are thrilled to meet you both. The Callahans had been traveling extensively, dividing their time between arts conferences in Europe and cancer research symposiums, where the Everly Mason Research Grant had begun funding promising studies. Their grief had evolved into productive action, just as Everly would have wanted. Dahlia moved to the window overlooking the garden, where a small memorial to Everly had been created, a peaceful space featuring her favorite flowers and a bench beside a bubbling fountain. The afternoon sun cast dappled shadows through the Japanese maple, its leaves just beginning to turn crimson with autumn's approach. 3 years since Everly's death. 3 years of building something from the ashes of betrayal and loss. The foundation had exceeded everyone's expectations, becoming not just a testament to one woman's talent, but a force for nurturing creativity throughout the Bay Area. And all because of a will, a lie, and a truth ultimately more complex than anyone had initially understood. In Portland, Willow Bennett closed her laptop with satisfaction. Her remote consultation with a Seattle-based tech firm had gone exceptionally well, likely securing a 6-month contract that would allow her to maintain her flexible working arrangement. "Mommy, look," called a small voice from the living room floor. Aurora, now 3 years old, had constructed an elaborate tower from building blocks, her dark curls falling across her forehead as she concentrated. "That's amazing, sweetheart," Willow praised, kneeling beside her daughter. "It's even taller than yesterday's." "I'm going to be a builder like Daddy," Aurora announced, carefully placing another block atop her creation. Willow smiled, both warmed and complicated by her daughter's words. Jacob had indeed become a builder again, though not in the prestigious engineering capacity he'd once enjoyed. After relocating to Portland 2 years ago, he'd started working with a construction company, specializing in affordable housing, eventually moving into project management. His financial circumstances remained modest compared to his former life, but he'd established stability and, more importantly, consistency in Aurora's life. Their co-parenting arrangement had evolved cautiously. Initial supervised visits had given way to regular weekend stays at Jacob's small but comfortable apartment. Aurora adored her father, who approached parenthood with a dedication that sometimes surprised Willow. "Speaking of Daddy, he'll be here soon to take you to the park," Willow reminded her. "Shall we get your shoes on?" As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Aurora abandoned her tower, racing to the door with excited squeals. Willow opened it to reveal Jacob, casually dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt, a far cry from the tailored suits of his previous life. "There's my architect," he greeted Aurora, scooping her into his arms. Ready for some serious swing time? Aurora nodded enthusiastically. I made a super tall tower, wanna see? Absolutely, Jacob replied, setting her down to follow her excited lead. He exchanged a brief, polite smile with Willow. After 3 years, they had established a functional relationship centered entirely on Aurora's well-being. The romantic connection that had once seemed so intense, so worth any sacrifice, had dissolved completely. In its place was something neither had anticipated, a careful, mutual respect. She's been talking about the park all morning, Willow said. I packed some apple slices and her water bottle in her backpack. Jacob nodded. I'll have her back by 6, unless... He hesitated. Unless you'd like to join us. The fall festival is happening at Laurelhurst Park. Might be fun for all of us. Willow was momentarily surprised by the invitation. They rarely spent time together as a trio outside of Aurora's birthday celebrations and school events. Sure, she found herself saying. That sounds nice. Something like relief flickered across Jacob's face. Great. Aurora will be thrilled. Later, as they walked through the park's leaf-strewn paths, Aurora running slightly ahead to examine every interesting rock and squirrel, Willow found herself studying Jacob. The past 3 years had changed him visibly. Threads of grey at his temples, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But the most significant change was in his demeanor. The calculating ambition that had once defined him had been replaced by a quieter, more grounded presence. I got the Seattle contract, Willow mentioned, as they paused to watch Aurora on the swings. Congratulations, Jacob said sincerely. That's the remote one you were hoping for, right? Willow nodded. It means I can keep flexible hours, be home when Aurora needs me. That's great. You've built something impressive, Willow, on your own terms. The simple acknowledgement warmed her unexpectedly. Jacob had become generous with such observations, recognizing others' achievements without making them about himself. It was one of many small evolutions she'd noticed. How's your project going? She asked. The veteran housing development. Jacob's expression brightened. We break ground next month. It's not the most profitable contract, but it's meaningful work. 20 units for veterans transitioning back to civilian life. You seem happy with it, Willow observed. I am, he acknowledged. It's strange, I make a third of what I used to, but I sleep better. As Aurora called for them to watch her jump from the swing, Willow found herself reflecting on the long, complicated journey that had brought them here. The affair, Everly's death, the will's revelation, the painful separation, all of it culminating in this unexpected afternoon of peaceful co-parenting. I never thanked you, Jacob said suddenly, his eyes still on their daughter. For what? Aurora's middle name, using Everly's name. He turned to face her. It was generous, especially then. Willow was quiet for a moment. It felt right. A way of acknowledging everything that happened instead of pretending. Jacob nodded. The foundation is having its 3rd anniversary gala tonight. Dahlia sends me the updates sometimes. Do you ever think about going back to San Francisco? Sometimes, he admitted. Not to stay, just to see what they've built. To pay my respects properly. Willow studied him. You should go, sometime. For closure, if nothing else. Maybe, Jacob agreed softly. Someday. The Callahan Arts Foundation's 3rd anniversary gala transformed the building into a showcase of artistic excellence. San Francisco's cultural elite mingled with foundation-supported artists, philanthropists and patrons amid displays highlighting the organization's achievements. In the central gallery, Catherine and Thomas Callahan, elegant in evening wear, greeted guests with practiced warmth. 3 years of channeling their grief into purpose had mellowed their pain into something productive, though the loss of their daughter remained an ever-present undertone to their work. The Everly Mason Research Grant has funded 3 promising studies this year, Thomas explained to an interested donor. One at UCSF is showing particularly encouraging results for early detection. Catherine noticed Dahlia signaling from across the room. Excuse us, she said graciously, guiding Thomas toward their executive director. Everything's ready for the unveiling, Dahlia informed them quietly. Whenever you'd like to proceed. The unveiling referred to the evening's centerpiece event, the public debut of Everly's portrait of Jacob, which had remained in private storage since its discovery. After extensive discussion, the Callahans had decided it belonged in the permanent collection, an important piece of Everly's artistic journey. Let's do it now, Catherine decided, before dinner is served. Dahlia nodded, moving to the small podium set up beside a draped canvas in the special exhibition area. A discreet chime brought conversations to a lull as guests gathered expectantly. "Good evening," Dahlia began. "The Callahan Arts Foundation exists because of one artist's vision and courage. Everly Mason's work continues to inspire and challenge us, not just through its technical brilliance but through its emotional honesty." She gestured toward the covered painting. "Tonight we add to our permanent collection a piece that has never been publicly displayed. Created in the final months of Everly's life, it represents a complex emotional truth that we've been hesitant to share until now." Thomas and Catherine joined Dahlia beside the draped canvas. "This portrait," Thomas continued, "shows that even in her darkest moments, Everly sought to capture the full humanity of her subject, to see beyond betrayal to the possibility of redemption." With that cryptic introduction, Catherine pulled the cord, revealing the portrait of Jacob. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Those familiar with Everly's story recognized the subject immediately. Her husband, the man whose infidelity during her illness had become part of the Foundation's origin story. What shocked them wasn't the subject, but the treatment. There was no bitterness in the portrait, no hint of the anger that had fueled her Betrayal in Blue series. Instead, Jacob appeared as he might have been, or might yet become, a man of depth, capable of both great love and great failure, haunted yet not defined by his mistakes. Everly titled this work, "What Might Have Been," Dahlia explained. "We display it not to rewrite history, but to honor her complete artistic vision, one that encompassed both righteous anger and profound empathy." As guests moved closer to examine the portrait, Dahlia slipped away to join Catherine and Thomas in a quiet corner. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly. "Making the portrait public changes the narrative." "It's time," Catherine replied. "We've built the foundation on Everly's talent, not just on her tragedy. This completes the picture." "Have you heard from him?" Thomas asked. "Jacob," Dahlia nodded. "He sends a contribution to the research grant every year. Anonymous, but I recognize the Portland postmark." "Does he know about the portrait being unveiled?" "I sent him an invitation," Dahlia admitted. "He declined but thanked me for thinking of him." Thomas's expression remained complex, grief and anger tempered by time into something more nuanced. "I still can't forgive him," he said, "but I've stopped hating him. That's progress, I suppose." "Everly would be proud," Catherine said, touching her husband's arm. "Of all of this, the foundation, the grant, even our complicated peace with the past." Later, as the gala concluded, Dahlia found herself alone in the gallery with the portrait. Jacob's painted eyes seemed to follow her, questioning, perhaps, or seeking understanding. "She never stopped loving you," Dahlia said to the image, "even when she was plotting her revenge. That's what made it so powerful. That's what none of us understood at first." In Seattle, Jacob sat in his hotel room, laptop open to the Callahan Arts Foundation website where a live stream of the gala had just concluded. He hadn't planned to watch, had decided years ago to respect the boundaries implied by his exclusion from Everly's legacy, but Dahlia's unexpected invitation had cracked that resolve. His breath had caught when they unveiled the portrait. Seeing himself through Everly's eyes, not as the villain she had every right to paint, but as the man she had once believed in, was both gift and indictment. With trembling fingers, he opened his email and composed a message to Dahlia. "I watched the live stream. Thank you for including her portrait in the collection. It's an undeserved kindness. The foundation has become something extraordinary, exactly what Everly would have wanted. I'm grateful her vision lives on through your work. If it would be appropriate, I'd like to visit sometime. Not for any public event, just privately, to pay my respects properly after all this time. Regardless of your answer, please know that I continue to work on becoming the person she glimpsed in that portrait. It's a lifetime journey, but one I'm committed to for Aurora's sake and for my own. With gratitude and respect, Jacob." He hesitated before pressing send, aware that this small overture might be rejected. The Callahans had every right to maintain their distance, to preserve the Foundation's space as one free from his presence. Yet something in Dahlia's decision to display the portrait suggested an opening, however slight. Not forgiveness, he didn't expect or deserve that, but perhaps acknowledgement that Everly's story, and by extension his own, contained more dimensions than the simple narrative of betrayal and revenge. Jacob pressed send, then closed his laptop. Tomorrow he would return to Portland, to his modest apartment and meaningful work, to weekend visits with Aurora and the careful relationship he'd built with Willow. His life now was smaller than his previous one in some ways, larger in others, defined not by acquisition but by attention, by presence, by the daily choice to face reality without evasion. Everly had given him that, ultimately, not through her forgiveness, which he had forfeited, but through her unflinching commitment to truth. Her revenge had destroyed the man he had been, but her portrait offered a glimpse of who he might become, if he had the courage to keep trying. 1 month later, Jacob stood alone in the memorial garden behind the Callahan Arts Foundation, autumn leaves crunching beneath his feet. Dahlia had arranged this private visit on a Monday, when the gallery was closed to the public, ensuring he wouldn't encounter the Callahans or foundation patrons. The small garden was peaceful, designed with Everly's aesthetic sensibilities in mind. A stone bench faced a simple fountain, surrounded by plants she had loved, lavender, rosemary, Japanese maples. A discreet plaque bore her name and the dates of her birth and death, along with a single line, "Truth illuminates even the darkest corners." Jacob sat on the bench, feeling both out of place and exactly where he needed to be. He had brought nothing with him, no flowers or tokens that might seem presumptuous, just his presence, his acknowledgement, his long-delayed reckoning with what had happened here. "I didn't expect you to come," came Dahlia's voice from behind him. Jacob turned to find her standing at the garden entrance. "Thank you for allowing it." Dahlia moved to sit beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. "The Callahans know you're here. They're not ready to see you, but they didn't object to your visit." "That's more than I have any right to expect," Jacob acknowledged. They sat in silence for several moments, the fountain's gentle splashing the only sound. "How is Aurora?" Dahlia finally asked. Jacob smiled. "Amazing. Smart, creative, stubborn. She builds elaborate structures with blocks, then explains them in great detail to anyone who'll listen. Like her father," Dahlia observed. "And artistic like her middle namesake," Jacob added quietly. "She sees things others miss, details, colors." Dahlia nodded. "I'd like to meet her someday, if that would be all right." "Of course," Jacob replied, surprised by the offer. "She should know about all of this when she's older. About Everly, the foundation, what happened, the complete truth." "I've been thinking about truth lately," Dahlia said, gazing at the fountain. "How Everly wielded it, like both weapon and shield. The lie about the treatment, the 20% chance, was devastating precisely because it contained just enough truth to be believable." "She always understood the power of narrative," Jacob agreed, "as an artist, as a person." "The portrait complicated everything," Dahlia continued. "When I found it in storage alongside the medical reports revealing the truth, I wasn't sure what to do. It seemed to contradict the revenge she'd engineered so carefully." "It didn't, though," Jacob said thoughtfully. "Not really. The revenge was about consequences, about justice. The portrait was about possibility, what might have been, what could still be in some form." Dahlia studied him. "You've changed." "I had to," Jacob replied simply. "The man I was couldn't be Aurora's father, couldn't look in the mirror each morning, couldn't honor whatever Everly saw that made her paint that portrait." They lapsed into silence again, more comfortable now. The afternoon light filtered through the Japanese maple's leaves, casting crimson shadows across the garden. "She would have loved this space," Jacob said eventually. "She designed it," Dahlia revealed. "During her final weeks, every plant, the placement of the bench, the fountain, all specified in her notes for the foundation." Jacob wasn't surprised. It was so like Everly to plan beyond her own life, to create beauty even from absence. "I should let you have some time alone here," Dahlia said, rising. "The gallery opens at 9 tomorrow if you'd like to see the exhibition before you leave town." "Thank you," Jacob said, "for everything, for carrying her vision forward, for allowing me this visit." After Dahlia departed, Jacob remained on the bench, surrounded by Everly's final design. He thought about the complex legacy she had created, the foundation nurturing new artists, the research grant funding potential breakthroughs, and most personally, the portrait offering both indictment and possibility. He reached into his pocket and removed a small smooth stone he had carried since leaving Sausalito. It had come from their garden, one of the few personal items he had taken when forced to leave their home. He placed it carefully at the base of the plaque, a private marker of his visit, his acknowledgement. "I'm trying," he whispered to the garden, to her memory. Every day, to see clearly, to live honestly, to be worthy of Aurora, to become something closer to what you once saw in me. The fountain burbled in response, sunlight catching the water droplets and transforming them momentarily into prisms of light, a final artwork created through Everly's design, illuminating even this dark corner of their shared history. As Jacob finally rose to leave, he felt something shift within him. Not forgiveness, which wasn't his to claim, but perhaps a step toward the redemption her portrait had suggested might be possible. He would return to Portland tomorrow to his daughter, to the life he was building from the ruins of what came before. A life shaped by Everly's final act of creation, not just her revenge, but her insistence on truth, whatever it might reveal. Behind him, golden afternoon light filled the garden, catching the water, the leaves, the stone he had left behind, all elements of a composition as carefully balanced as any Everly had painted, telling a story of loss, consequence, and the possibility, however remote, of transformation. 7 years later. "Daddy, who's Everly?" The question came without warning, as Jacob helped Aurora with her 5th-grade family history project. Now 10 years old, she sat cross-legged on the living room floor of his modest Portland bungalow, surrounded by family photographs and construction paper. Jacob paused, meeting his daughter's inquisitive brown eyes, so much like his own, yet with an observant intensity that often reminded him of another woman entirely. "Everly was my first wife," he answered carefully, "before I met your mum." Aurora considered this, tilting her head slightly. "Is that why my middle name is Everly? Mom said I was named after someone important." "Yes," Jacob confirmed. "She was an artist, a very talented one." "What happened to her?" Jacob had known this conversation would come eventually. He and Willow had agreed years ago to be truthful with Aurora when she began asking questions, though they'd never settled on exactly when or how. "She got sick," he said gently. "Cancer. She died before you were born." Aurora nodded with the matter-of-fact acceptance children often show toward death. "Do you have pictures of her?" "Not here," Jacob admitted, "but there's a foundation in San Francisco with her paintings. Her photograph is there too. Can we visit sometime for my project?" Jacob felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he experienced whenever Everly's name arose unexpectedly. After 10 years, the sharp pain had dulled, but the complexity remained. "We'll talk to your mom about it," he promised. "It might be a good idea." Later that night, after Aurora had gone to sleep in the room she used during her weekends with him, Jacob called Willow. "She's asking about Everly," he said without preamble. "I wondered when that would start," Willow replied. At 41, her voice had acquired a calm steadiness that came from a decade of single motherhood, balanced with a successful career in systems design. "What did you tell her?" "Just the basics. That she was my first wife, an artist. That she died of cancer. Nothing about—" "Not yet," Jacob assured her, "but she wants to visit the foundation for her family history project." Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of their shared past. "I think it's time," Willow finally said. "She's old enough for some version of the truth. Not everything, but enough." "I've been thinking the same," Jacob agreed. "We can't shield her forever, especially with her name." "Have you been back since that one visit?" "No," Jacob admitted. "I've kept in touch with Dahlia, made my annual contribution to the research grant, but I've respected their space." "Then maybe this is right," Willow suggested, Aurora's questions opening that door. Time has a way of changing perspectives. The Callahan Arts Foundation had expanded considerably over the decades since its founding. What began as a transformed family home now encompassed an entire complex in Pacific Heights, including galleries, studios for artists in residence, educational spaces, and administrative offices. Jacob stood on the sidewalk across the street, holding Aurora's hand, watching visitors enter and exit the modern glass addition that connected to the original Victorian structure. Willow had opted not to join them, sensing this journey belonged to Jacob and Aurora alone. "It's bigger than I expected," Aurora observed, squinting up at the building in the bright San Francisco sunshine. "It's grown a lot since it started," Jacob explained. "They do important work here. And Everly's paintings are inside?" "Yes, many of them." Aurora tugged his hand. "Let's go then. I want to see them." Jacob hesitated. "Actually, I've arranged something special. The executive director is going to give you a private tour." As if on cue, Dahlia emerged from the building. At 50, she remained elegant and poised, her once dark hair now streaked with silver. She spotted them immediately and crossed the street. "You must be Aurora," she said warmly, bending slightly to meet the girl's eyes. "I'm Dahlia Monroe. I was your namesake's best friend." Aurora's eyes widened. "You knew Everly?" "Very well," Dahlia confirmed. "And I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time." She straightened, meeting Jacob's gaze with a gentle smile. "Hello, Jacob." "Dahlia," he nodded, grateful for her understanding. "Thank you for arranging this." "Of course." She turned to Aurora. "Shall we begin our tour? We'll start with the early works, from when Everly was not much older than you." As Dahlia led Aurora toward the entrance, Jacob remained on the sidewalk. They had discussed this arrangement via email. Aurora would tour the foundation with Dahlia, while Jacob waited outside. Both understood his reasons for not entering the galleries himself. Some boundaries, once established, served their purpose best by being maintained. "Aren't you coming, Daddy?" Aurora called back, noticing his stillness. "I'm going to wait here," Jacob explained. "Ms. Monroe will show you everything. I'll be right here when you're finished." Aurora looked confused, but accepted this with a child's flexibility. "Okay, I'll take lots of mental pictures to tell you about." For the next hour, Jacob sat on a bench across from the foundation, watching people come and go. Somewhere inside, his daughter was encountering Everly's work, her story, a crucial piece of her own history. Dahlia would be gentle but honest. They had agreed. Age-appropriate truth. He wondered what Aurora would make of Everly's paintings, whether she would recognize the talent that had once filled their home in Sausalito, whether she would see in those brushstrokes and colors something of the mystery that connected her to a woman she would never meet, but whose name she carried. "And this," Dahlia said, leading Aurora into a small, specially lit gallery, "is the portrait room." Aurora had been attentive throughout the tour, asking thoughtful questions about techniques and colors, showing a natural appreciation for art that Dahlia found both touching and familiar. Now she stood before a large canvas, her expression suddenly focused. "That's my dad," she said, recognizing Jacob's younger face in Everly's portrait. "Yes," Dahlia confirmed. "Everly painted this during her illness. It was the last portrait she ever completed." Aurora studied it carefully. "He looks sad. And something else." "What do you see?" Dahlia asked gently. "Like he's thinking about something important. Like he's sorry." Aurora glanced up at Dahlia. "Was he sorry about something?" Dahlia considered her answer carefully. "Your father and Everly had a complicated relationship at the end. There were mistakes on both sides. But this portrait shows that she still saw goodness in him, even then. Is that why my middle name is Everly? Because she saw good things in my dad?" "That," Dahlia smiled, "and because your mother is a remarkable woman who understood that our stories are always connected, even when they're difficult." Aurora nodded, seeming to process this information with surprising maturity. "Can I ask you something else?" "Of course." "The paintings in the blue room, they made me feel sad and a little scared. Were those about my dad too?" Dahlia hadn't planned to show Aurora the Betrayal in Blue series, but the girl had noticed the room during their tour and been drawn to the powerful colors. "Yes," Dahlia admitted. "Those paintings came from a painful time in Everly's life. But art helps us transform pain into something meaningful. That's what Everly did with hers. Is that why this place exists? To make something good from something sad?" Dahlia felt a surge of emotion at the child's insight. "That's exactly right, and it's worked. The foundation has helped hundreds of artists. The research grant in Everly's name is funding studies that might someday prevent others from suffering as she did." As they completed the tour, Dahlia led Aurora to the memorial garden, which had matured beautifully over the years. The Japanese maples were now full-sized, creating a canopy of shifting light. "Your father sat here when he visited," Dahlia said, indicating the stone bench. "He left that small rock." She pointed to a smooth stone at the base of Everly's plaque, now partially embedded in the soil after years of rainfall and growth. Aurora touched the stone gently. "He was sad about Everly dying." "Yes," Dahlia said, "and about other things that happened, but he's worked very hard to become a good father to you. That's what Everly would have wanted most." When Aurora emerged from the foundation, her expression was thoughtful, more serious than when she'd entered. Jacob stood as she approached, uncertain what to expect. "How was it?" he asked. Aurora considered her answer. Her paintings are beautiful, even the sad blue ones. Jacob nodded, his throat tight. Ms. Monroe told me some things, Aurora continued. Not everything. She said, when I'm older, you and Mom will tell me the whole story. We will, Jacob promised, when you're ready. I saw the painting of you, Aurora said, studying his face as if comparing it to the portrait. I think she must have loved you a lot to paint you that way. The simple observation, so characteristic of Everly's own directness, threatened to undo Jacob completely. She did, he managed, more than I deserved. Aurora took his hand again. Can we come back sometime? All of us, you, me, and Mom. Miss Monroe said the Callahans might like to meet me someday. They're Everly's parents. If that's what you want, Jacob agreed, amazed at his daughter's capacity to embrace the complicated connections of her origin. As they walked toward Union Square, where they planned to meet Willow for dinner, Aurora looked back at the foundation building. Daddy? Ms. Monroe showed me Everly's last painting. It wasn't the one of you, it was called After. Jacob hadn't known about this artwork. What was it like? It's a sunrise, Aurora described. Really dark blues and purples at the bottom, but then light coming up, all gold and pink. Ms. Monroe said Everly painted it knowing she wouldn't see what came after, but believing something beautiful would happen anyway. Jacob stopped walking, struck by the description and its implicit message. That sounds like her. I think, Aurora said carefully with the profound simplicity children sometimes access, that I might be part of the after she painted, and so are you and Mom. And the foundation. All the things that came after she was gone. Jacob looked down at his daughter, this perceptive, compassionate child who carried Everly's name, and somehow her spirit of transforming pain into possibility. In that moment, he finally understood what Everly's portrait of him had truly been. Not just a record of what might have been, but a challenge to what could still be. I think you're right, he said softly. I think that's exactly what she would say. 10 years after Everly Mason's death, her legacy thrived in ways both anticipated and unexpected. The Callahan Arts Foundation had become one of the West Coast's premier arts organizations. The research grant bearing her name had contributed to promising advances in early cancer detection. Her paintings commanded increasing recognition in the art world, but perhaps her most profound impact was less visible. The lives she had transformed through her final act of creation, a complex composition of truth, consequence, and possibility. Catherine and Thomas Callahan had found purpose in their daughter's legacy, their grief eventually yielding to pride in what the foundation had accomplished. Though they never fully reconciled with Jacob, they had, at Dahlia's gentle urging, agreed to meet Aurora, recognizing in her a connection to their daughter that transcended the circumstances of her birth. Dahlia Monroe had built a meaningful second career as the foundation's guiding force, ensuring Everly's vision extended beyond her lifetime. Her friendship with Willow had developed gradually, bridging past and present with surprising grace. Willow Bennett had established herself professionally while raising Aurora with steady devotion. Her decision to give her daughter Everly's name had proved prescient, an acknowledgement of interconnection that became the foundation for healing rather than division. Jacob Mason had rebuilt his life on a smaller, more honest scale. His annual contributions to the research grant had grown as his career stabilized. His relationship with Aurora had become the center of his world, a source of joy and redemption he never believed possible in the aftermath of Everly's death. And while he never entered the foundation buildings, his presence across the street during Aurora's visits became a quiet tradition, a boundary that paradoxically created connection. And Aurora Everly Mason, now 10 years old, stood at the intersection of all these stories, embodying the after that Everly had painted but would never see, a child born of complicated circumstances who nonetheless carried forward the best possibilities of all who had shaped her story. Just as Everly's final painting had depicted, darkness gradually yielding to light, not erasing what came before but transforming it into something new, something that could only exist because of what preceded it. A composition balanced perfectly between memory and possibility, truth and grace ending and beginning, continuing to reveal its meaning long after the artist had set down her brush. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now, and we'll see you there.